Hey everyone, I'll keep this pretty brief. I'm got a lot going on. So last week, week two, we talked about various aspects of malpractice and tort reform, lots of different things in last week's materials. But we also talked a bit about the Redonda Vaught case in Tennessee. And so hopefully you got a few interesting tidbits out of that. If you haven't yet submitted your self-and-peer assessment, please do that ASAP. I know I was still missing a couple of them, but so hopefully you enjoyed that assignment. Really, the key is being able to speak to kind of both sides of an argument. That's really what I was getting at there. So, there's certain people that personally think that this prosecution was a good thing, and then there's certainly lots of other people that think that's a very bad thing for the industry overall. And so, kind of seeing both sides of that is really what I was getting at there. It'll be interesting. I know her hearing is coming up pretty soon, so interesting to see how that goes. This has been a long, drawn out case. Really happened quite a long time ago. So this week we're talking about HIPAA and HIPAA security, HIPAA privacy. I've got a bunch of different videos in here. We've got some basic info from CMS. We've got information in the textbook as well. But really, the key is there's several different. HIPAA was a law that was passed in 1996. Healthcare, jeepers, I can't even think of what it stands for right now. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Sorry, it's very late and it's been a long day. So Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, as you look at the HIPAA acronym, you would have no idea how that ties to privacy and security, but there was an aspect of the law called the administrative simplification, and within that administrative simplification was the directive by the Congress and the Senate over the legislature overall, telling CMS to create law or to create regulations that would drive improvements in patient privacy and improvements in security of healthcare information, amongst some other things. The transactions and code sets rule that set very specific code sets in place, like the CPT codes, ICD-10 codes, etc., as well as the way we transfer information between providers and clearinghouses and insurance companies. So all of that was part of HIPAA. The things that we're really most concerned about in this class are the privacy and security regulations. There are two sets of regulations that were developed and released by the Department of Health and Human Services and or what we now know as HIPAA. But HIPAA was something very different back in the 90s, and now this is what we think of as HIPAA at this point. So, review that information. We have a HIPAA discussion board this week, and then we please take the time to review the information about HIPAA before you do this written assignment this week. I've had lots of students that are like, "Oh, I know about HIPAA," and then they just do this assignment. And there's little nuances to this assignment, and each one of these four facts that drive whether or not there's a privacy or a security breach. And know that privacy breaches and security breaches are different. You can have a privacy breach without having a security breach. You could have a security breach without a privacy breach, but it's unlikely. It depends on what type of security was breached. But just know that they're different. They have completely different sets of rules and different things that we're looking for there. So, and then obviously our quiz and our ed puzzle this week. So let's take a look at the quiz questions from last week. So first question: several states have modified the collateral source rule in order to. So the collateral source rule is a rule that kind of governs where plaintiffs can get can recoup funds from. So the collateral source rule is about the fact that a plaintiff in a case, let's say a plaintiff in a medical malpractice case, if they are already getting payment maybe the hospital has recouped all of their damages. Maybe the hospital wrote off the bills and those types of things. In that case, then if it's a state where there's a collateral source rule, what that means is then the court can't pay them as well. The court couldn't say, not the court's going to pay them, but the court can order, hey, person that committed malpractice, you have to pay this patient. And if the hospital's already paid, in states that have modified the collateral source rule, that means that they're not going to get double payment. In states that have not, oftentimes, even though hospitals and doctors' offices and everyone under the sun write off charges for patients that have been wronged, oftentimes the courts will pay them for those charges anyway, which oftentimes, if you're in a collateral source state, the potential exists that your pain and suffering money will be higher. So ultimately, it's really not limiting what the plaintiff gets. It's really just limiting the specific damages that are paid that aren't related to pain and suffering. Now, many states have also started to limit the pain and suffering payments. Like I think back to the case, and this is really one of the ones that drove it, the case of the woman who bought a coffee from McDonald's at the drive-thru, spilled it in her lap, and claimed that she had these third-degree burns on her legs and whatnot, and made buku dollars from McDonald's, but in that case, it was all about pain and suffering. So a lot of states have kind of ratcheted that down, and so that's kind of where that goes. Next question: blank is the performance of an unlawful or improper act. So our answer is malfeasance. So I always think of mal. Mal means bad in French. So if someone has done something bad, or unlawful or improper, malfeasance. So just be aware of that as opposed to the nonfeasance, misfeasance, and then malpractice. Malpractice is negligence in a professional setting. So something could be but not really, I guess, because malpractice is really negligence as opposed to malfeasance. But sometimes there is some overlap in these, and you may have a person that has committed malfeasance as well as malpractice, depending on the situation. So malfeasance, the performance of an unlawful or improper act. Next question, A or and, depending on our answer, is the intentional touching of another's person in a socially impermissible manner without that person's consent. So this is one that is almost always confused. So just be aware, people are not, in common culture, we use these terms and aren't really aware of what they mean. So the answer is battery. So battery is the actual laying of hands on somebody that has not consented to that, as opposed to assault, which is probably the answer that others chose that didn't choose battery. Assault is a threat to do so, a credible threat. So I always use the example. So let's say that a 2-year-old walked into my office and said, "I'm going to punch you in the nose." And I'd be like, "Yeah, right. You can't reach my nose." So that would not be assault because they can't. It's not a credible threat. There's not much that they could do. But let's say that 2-year-old's 16-year-old brother followed them in and said, "I'm going to punch you in the nose." That would be assault. Even though they didn't touch me, it is a credible threat. If they in fact punched me in the nose, then that would be battery. So assault and battery. Assault is the threat, credible threat. Battery is the actual intentional touching of another person. Why do we care about this in healthcare? Well, because if you have a provider that operates on a person without their consent, that's battery. It would be inappropriate to do so. They intentionally touch someone in an inappropriate way without their consent. That would be considered battery. So that's why informed consent is a crucial part of the healthcare process. And that's that. So any questions coming up this week, please just let me know. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing everyone in the classroom. Thanks.